You have been taught that breathing is merely an unconscious reflex, a mindless cycle of intake and release, as ordinary as the ticking of a clock. But what if you have been lulled into a dangerous amnesia? What if the very act that sustains your body also holds the key to awakening your spirit, and you have simply forgotten how to remember? Pause for a moment. Feel the air entering your lungs. Feel it leave. So familiar, so deceptively simple. But beneath this familiarity lies a hidden current, a secret that once guided the greatest civilizations to their luminous heights. In the temples of Egypt, priests breathed in rhythms that synchronized their heartbeats with the stars. In the shaded courtyards of ancient Greece, philosophers inhaled deeply before speaking truths that still shape your thoughts today. In India's cradle of mysticism, sages mapped entire universes within the inhale and the exhale. Does it stir something in you to imagine that every breath you take is an echo of these timeless practices? Could it be that, even now, your lungs remember what your mind has neglected? You see, the ancients did not simply breathe to survive. They breathed to become. They saw breath as a bridge, an invisible architecture binding flesh to spirit. In their view, the air you draw into your body is not empty. It is saturated with prana, pneuma, ka, names given to the same luminous essence, the living spirit of creation. Perhaps you have felt this once, without knowing its name. A moment when you stood on a mountaintop, your lungs stretched wide, and you felt larger than your own skin. Or when you were a child, running until you could scarcely breathe, and the world shimmered in that oxygen-drunk exhilaration. What if those glimpses were not accidents, but invitations? What if the breath is always whispering to you, calling you back to the fullness you have forgotten? But how did you forget? Your modern world rewards speed and distraction. It tells you to multitask, to optimize, to run faster, while your breath grows shallow and unnoticed. You are trained to believe that consciousness belongs to the mind alone, that life is a puzzle of thoughts to be solved. Yet in this endless search for more productivity, more certainty, you have exiled yourself from the source of all clarity, the living intelligence of your own body. When the ancients spoke of the breath, they did not describe it as mere air. They described it as a current of divine memory, a carrier of codes that awaken dormant faculties within you. They claimed that to breathe with awareness is to drink directly from the fountain of life itself. Do you see the irony? That in your pursuit of knowledge and power, you have neglected the oldest, most intimate doorway to both? It is time to remember. Close your eyes. Let your next inhale be slower, deeper. Feel it fill you, not just your chest, but the space behind your ribs, the hollow at the base of your spine. Notice how this single act softens something inside you, how it calls you back to a center you rarely visit. This is not an escape from life's complexity, but a return to the source from which all complexity arises. Consider this. Your first action upon entering this world was to breathe. Your last act before departing will be the same. Between these two bookends of existence, how many of your breaths have been conscious? How many have you met with reverence? What if the greatest spiritual journey is not found in distant temples or in secret doctrines, but here, in this rhythm you carry inside you? What if every inhale is a beginning, and every exhale is a release, a miniature cycle of death and rebirth, repeating endlessly within you? This is the wisdom the ancients preserved and the modern world obscures. They knew that the breath is the most accessible sacrament, a ceremony in which every human can partake without priest or permission. Imagine what would happen if you reclaimed this heritage, if you began to approach each breath as a holy event, a moment to commune with the essence that pervades all things. If you dared to remember that you are not separate from the air around you, but an extension of it, a wave in an endless ocean of living consciousness. How would this change the way you meet your life? Would you still feel so starved for purpose and belonging if you knew that every breath is proof that you belong already? The ancient Egyptians believed the breath was the carrier of Ka, the vital spark that animated the body. To neglect your breath was to deny your own divinity. The Greeks spoke of pneuma, the animating spirit, moving invisibly through all beings. The yogis of India described prana as the universal life force, moving through channels and chakras, shaping the destiny of every soul. These were not superstitions. They were observations, subtle sciences based on generations of intimate exploration. And now you stand at a crossroads. Will you continue to sleepwalk through the mechanical rising and falling of your chest? Or will you choose to reclaim your inheritance? You are not simply a creature who breathes. You are a living temple in which spirit and matter converge. And your breath is the chant that sanctifies this temple. Ask yourself, when you take your next breath, will you still believe it is ordinary? Or will you dare to wonder what else it can awaken? You have begun to suspect that every breath you draw is more than a reflex. It is an ancient invitation. Now you stand on the threshold of that realization, ready to step deeper into the mystery. Because if the breath truly is the bridge between body and spirit, then you must ask, what does it carry across that threshold? Imagine inhalation not as mere consumption of air, but as a rite of alchemy. Each time you draw in breath, you take the raw material of existence, oxygen, scent, vibration, and transmute it into something more subtle, more luminous. The ancients called this the sacred alchemy of inhalation, the process by which ordinary matter becomes spiritual vitality. Pause and feel it again, your next inhale. How it arrives unbidden, how it nourishes every cell. In that moment, you are part of a cosmic transaction, an exchange of energies that has no beginning and no end. Can you sense it now? The electricity that tingles in your chest when you breathe with awareness? The invisible heat that coils in your belly, waiting to be recognized? The Greeks believed that pneuma was not simply breath, but the very spark of consciousness, the animating principle that made perception possible. Without it, the body was inert. In their view, every inhale was a return to the origin of self-awareness, an echo of the primordial breath that first stirred the universe into being. In India, the sages saw prana as the substratum of all phenomena. Everything you see, taste, touch, every thought or feeling emerges from the modulation of this subtle force. Breathing was never just about survival. It was the first and most powerful form of communion with the divine. Modern science, too, has begun to glimpse this truth, though it uses different words. Neuroscientists now understand that slow, deep breathing directly modulates the vagus nerve, shifting you from stress to serenity. Biochemists have shown how oxygen feeds not just your tissues, but your mitochondria, the tiny engines that power your existence. Even psychologists now admit that breath is the single most potent regulator of emotion. But none of these explanations can fully capture the sacred quality you feel when you let the breath guide you past your ordinary thoughts. Have you ever noticed how, in moments of awe, your breathing changes? When you stand beneath a sky splashed with stars, when you hold a newborn child, when music pierces the armor of your cynicism, what happens? Your breath deepens, your body softens, your mind grows silent. Why? Because these moments are reminders of your origin. They return you to the same awareness the ancients revered, that you are not merely an observer of life, but a participant in its unfolding mystery. And the breath is both your anchor and your sail. Consider the story of Hypatia, the philosopher of Alexandria. When she taught her students, she would lead them in rhythmic breathing before discussing mathematics or astronomy. She believed the mind, untethered from the body, grew fragmented and untrustworthy. But a mind anchored in the breath was capable of perceiving hidden harmonies. Is it so different for you? How often do you rush from task to task, never pausing to notice the dissonance building inside? How often do you feel the tightness in your chest but ignore it, telling yourself you don't have time to breathe? What if you understood that this tension is not a flaw but a signal? That your body is pleading for a return to coherence? Breath is the first medicine, the first teacher, the first sacrament. Even now, as you read these words, your body yearns to be reconciled to itself, to remember that you are more than a collection of obligations and identities. That beneath all the roles you play, there is something simple and eternal waiting to be honored. Close your eyes for a moment. Place your hand on your belly. Inhale slowly through your nose, counting to 4. Feel your belly rise, your ribs expand, your collarbones lift. Hold this fullness for a heartbeat. Now exhale gently, counting to 6. Let the air leave you as if it were an offering, a surrender. Feel your body soften, your thoughts dissolve into stillness. This is not a technique. This is an ancient remembering. When the Egyptian priests performed their rituals, they believed every breath aligned them with the cosmic order. Ma'at, the principle of harmony that sustains existence. When your breath is ragged and unconscious, you are in a state of isfet, the chaos that fractures your spirit. But when you breathe with intention, you become an agent of Ma'at, a living expression of balance. Imagine how your life might change if you approached every inhalation as a chance to re-enter that sacred order. If you saw each exhale as a release of the debris that clouds your perception. Can you feel how your body responds to this possibility? You are not separate from the forces that shape the cosmos. The same invisible energy that spins the galaxies circulates in your lungs this very instant. When you breathe, you participate in a mystery older than language, older than civilization itself. Ask yourself, if the breath is this potent, why have you neglected it? Why have you treated it as an afterthought instead of a portal? What else have you missed by dismissing the ordinary as unremarkable? The sacred alchemy of inhalation is not about acquiring something you lack. It is about shedding what is false so that what is eternal can be revealed. And when you are willing to meet your breath with reverence, you begin to sense the shimmering threshold where the known world dissolves into the infinite. This is where transformation becomes inevitable. This is where you remember that you are and have always been both the alchemist and the gold. It is here, in this trembling space between your inhale and exhale, that you begin to discover what the ancients called the inner temple of silence. You may have wondered why, despite all your striving, peace remains elusive. Why, even when you have achieved your goals, a persistent ache remains, a hollow you cannot seem to fill. Could it be that you have been searching in the wrong direction? That while your gaze was fixed on the horizon, the treasure you seek was hidden in the quiet cave of your own body? Breathe again, slowly. Let the air seep into the spaces you have neglected, behind your heart, in the hollow of your throat, in the hidden depths of your belly. Can you feel it? That subtle expansion? That sense that there's a room inside you where no noise can enter? The philosophers of Greece called this space hesychia, the stillness at the center of all motion. The Indian sages named it Hridaya, the cave of the heart, where the individual soul and the universal self meet like lovers long parted. The Egyptian mystics knew it as the chamber of Ka, the indwelling spirit that witnesses every thought and feeling without being touched by them. This is not an abstraction. It is an experience waiting to unfold in you each time you breathe with awareness. Have you ever sat quietly and simply observed your breath? Not to change it, not to perfect it, but to be present with it. At first, the mind rebels. It chatters, protests, invents distractions. But if you persist, if you remain anchored to the rising and falling of your breath, something miraculous begins to happen. The incessant waves of thought grow gentle. The self you thought you were, so busy, so burdened, begins to dissolve. What remains is not absence, but a luminous presence, a witness untouched by fear or desire. It is here, in this temple of silence, that you encounter your true nature. But why is this so difficult for you to access in daily life? Because your world has taught you to fear stillness. You have been conditioned to equate silence with emptiness, inactivity with insignificance. You have been taught that worth comes from doing, from proving, from acquiring. Yet in the quiet between your breaths, you glimpse a truth more radical than any ideology, that you are already whole. That nothing you achieve or possess can add to the essence that lives in you like a hidden sun. The breath is the key to this realization because it unites what you usually experience as separate, body, mind, and spirit. In the simple act of inhaling and exhaling consciously, you weave these strands back together into a single tapestry of awareness. Consider the words of Plotinus, the great Neoplatonist. Withdraw into yourself and look, and if you do not find yourself beautiful yet, act as does the creator of a statue that is to be made beautiful. He cuts away here, he smooths there. So do you also. Cut away all that is excessive, straighten all that is crooked, bring light to all that is overcast. This sculpting of the soul does not happen in noise and haste. It happens in the inner temple you enter with every mindful breath. And here, you are no longer defined by the passing drama of your thoughts or the fluctuations of your emotions. You become the witness, the silent, luminous awareness in which all experience arises and dissolves. Have you felt this before? Perhaps in a moment of deep grief, when all your certainties shattered, and you discovered a strange serenity beneath the pain. Or in an instant of wonder so total that you forgot yourself completely. These glimpses are not anomalies. They are reminders of what you have always been. When you practice conscious breathing, you create the conditions for this remembrance to blossom. You cease to be merely a reactor to circumstance and become the sovereign of your own experience. Imagine how your life might unfold if you returned to this inner temple each day, even for a few minutes. Would the insults and praises of others hold the same power over you? Would you still be driven by the frantic need to prove your worth? Or would you stand rooted in the quiet certainty that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists? This is why the breath was revered in every wisdom tradition. It is the simplest and most direct path to the sanctuary within you. In the Upanishads, it is said, "As a tethered bird flies this way and that and comes to rest at last on its own perch, so the mind, tired of wandering, settles down in the self." And what is this self if not the silent witness that has been here all along, watching the drama of your life with compassionate detachment? When you inhabit this space, you do not become indifferent. On the contrary, you become more intimate with life, more responsive, more alive. But you are no longer entangled in the stories your mind weaves. You act without attachment, love without possession, grieve without despair. All of this begins with a single breath. Close your eyes again. Inhale gently, as if you are drawing the fragrance of the infinite into your heart. Hold it there for a moment. Feel its warmth, its subtle vibration. Exhale softly, releasing everything you do not need. And in the quiet that follows, listen. Beneath the noise of thought, there is a presence waiting for you. A presence that has never been diminished by your failures or inflated by your successes. This is the temple the ancients spoke of. This is the sanctuary you carry wherever you go. And this is the place you will return to each time you choose to breathe with reverence. You have glimpsed the inner temple of silence. You have felt the sacred stillness that breath reveals, that luminous awareness untouched by circumstance. But you may still wonder, how can this ancient remembering be woven into your everyday existence? How can you translate fleeting moments of clarity into a living transformation that reshapes the way you walk through the world? Here, the ancients offer you their most precious gift, the pathways they carved within themselves, through practices that survived thousands of years. These are the ancient pathways within, breathing rituals so profound that they became the pillars of civilizations. Across Egypt, Greece, and India, seekers turned their attention inward, harnessing the breath not only to nourish the body but to ignite the spirit. These practices were not curiosities or esoteric hobbies. They were the means by which people purified perception and prepared the soul for awakening. Imagine yourself in the temple of Karnak as dawn breaks, shafts of golden light spilling across hieroglyph-carved columns. The priests stand in stillness, inhaling in unison as they greet the rising sun. To them, this is not superstition, but a precise ritual, aligning the breath with Ra, the life-giving force. Each inhalation is a declaration. I am part of the order that sustains the cosmos. Can you feel the power in that intention? Or picture a philosopher in Athens, seated beneath a fig tree. He closes his eyes and inhales slowly, counting heartbeats, regulating breath until thought subsides. To the untrained eye, he appears idle, but within, he traverses the layers of his own consciousness, dissolving the illusions that bind ordinary perception. In India, the yogi sits cross-legged on the banks of the Ganges, spine erect, eyes half closed. With each inhalation, he draws prana into his heart center. With each exhalation, he releases the residues of fear and attachment. Over months and years, this practice becomes a vessel for transformation, refining not only the mind, but the subtle energy body that shapes destiny itself. These examples are not relics of an irrelevant past. They are living proof that you too carry this capacity for inner alchemy. But how do you begin? First, you must release the belief that mastery belongs only to saints or sages. You must understand that your very physiology was designed to receive and circulate spiritual energy. Every cell in your body is responsive to breath. Every thought you hold is colored by its rhythm. Consider what modern science has shown. When you engage in slow, rhythmic breathing, 4 to 6 breaths per minute, you shift the balance of your autonomic nervous system from sympathetic arousal, the fight or flight mode, to parasympathetic calm, the state of rest, healing, and integration. Your brain waves slow, synchronizing into coherent patterns. Your heart rate variability increases, enhancing resilience and clarity. Is it any wonder the ancients considered breath a vehicle for spiritual purification? Here's a practice drawn from these traditions. Read it slowly. Try it now if you feel ready. The Tri-Civilization Breath Ritual, Egyptian Dawn Breath. Upon waking, stand with your feet hip-width apart. Close your eyes. Inhale slowly through your nose, feeling the breath rise from the base of your spine to the crown of your head, as if you are drawing in sunlight. Hold for a count of 3, silently affirming, "I am aligned with the living cosmos." Exhale gently, releasing all stagnation. Repeat 7 times. Greek contemplative breath. Seated comfortably, bring your awareness to your heart. Inhale to a count of 4, pause to a count of 2, exhale to a count of 6. With each breath, imagine your heart filling with luminous clarity, the logos itself, a living intelligence beyond words. Practice for 5 minutes. Indian pranic breath. Sit with your spine erect. Close your right nostril with your thumb. Inhale slowly through the left nostril, feeling cool energy rise along your spine. Close the left nostril with your ring finger, hold for a brief pause, then exhale through the right nostril, feeling warmth release. Repeat on the opposite side. This alternate nostril breathing balances the subtle energies called Ida and Pingala, moon and sun currents within you. Can you sense the ancient familiarity of these gestures? You may wonder, will I feel something miraculous? Perhaps not at first. Centuries of forgetting do not dissolve in a single day. But with practice, you will notice subtle shifts, a growing spaciousness behind your thoughts, a softening of the chronic tensions that inhabit your muscles, a clarity that no longer depends on external validation. And soon, you will feel a rising confidence that you are not merely a passive observer of life's drama. You are the conductor of your own inner symphony. Remember, these practices are not about escaping reality. They are about refining your capacity to meet reality as it is. When your breath becomes conscious, you can respond rather than react. You can create rather than consume. This is why the ancients described breath as a chariot for the soul. In Egypt, the ka was said to ride the currents of air like a bird returning to its nest. In Greece, pneuma was the wind that carried the divine spark. In India, prana was the river flowing from the source of all creation into every living being. If you approach these rituals with sincerity, you will discover a paradox. What you are seeking has been with you all along. Close your eyes now. Feel the rhythm of your breath. Notice how each inhale is a return, each exhale a release. Ask yourself, if my breath can reveal such peace, what other gifts have I overlooked? If this ancient power lives within me, what else am I capable of remembering? What would it mean to let this awareness guide every word, every action, every heartbeat? These are not idle questions. They are invitations to become the living expression of what the ancients knew, that the breath is the threshold between the known and the infinite. And every time you cross it, you awaken a little more to the truth of who you are. You have followed the breath through the corridors of memory, into the inner temple of silence, and along the pathways etched by ancient civilizations. You have seen how the Egyptians aligned their breath with the rising sun, how Greek philosophers tethered their minds to the quiet tide of inhalation, how Indian sages transmuted each exhale into an offering of devotion. And now the question arises, what will you do with this remembering? Because knowing is not enough. To become the living breath is to embody what you have glimpsed, to infuse each day with the luminous awareness that every inhalation is sacred. This is not a practice you visit and then leave behind. It is a way of being, an unbroken devotion to the spirit that moves through you. Close your eyes once more. Breathe gently, as if the entire universe were exhaling into your lungs. Feel that shimmering presence you have met again and again. And now, imagine living your entire life from this space. What would it mean to rise each morning with the conviction that you are not incomplete? That you do not need to earn your worth because your existence itself is the miracle? Can you feel how this single insight dissolves the chronic hunger that drives so much of your suffering? The ancients knew this. That is why they did not compartmentalize breath as something only to be practiced in temples or monasteries. They wove it into every facet of life: work, rest, love, grief, because they understood that breath is the river carrying all experience, and when you meet it with reverence, everything becomes sanctified. Imagine that you are no longer chasing enlightenment as a destination, but recognizing it as the atmosphere in which you already live. Each breath becomes a reminder: I am here, I am alive, I am whole. This is not a concept to be believed, it is a state to be tasted. How do you embody it? You begin by dissolving the boundary between practice and life. When you walk, notice your breathing. Feel the ground beneath your feet as if the earth itself were lending you its gravity. When you speak, let each word arise on a wave of conscious exhalation. Sense how clarity grows when you anchor language in presence. When you meet pain, whether in your body or your heart, breathe into it rather than recoiling. Feel how this simple act transforms suffering into tenderness, resistance into acceptance. This is how the living breath becomes your constant companion. You do not have to abandon your responsibilities or retreat to a cave. You simply bring the same reverence you felt in those moments of stillness into every circumstance. In time, you will discover that your very presence begins to affect those around you. You will become a catalyst, someone whose calm is contagious, whose clarity inspires others to remember their own wholeness. This is no small thing. Perhaps the greatest act of service you can offer the world is your own remembrance. Because when you embody the living breath, you affirm a truth that transcends all divisions of culture and creed, that the essence of life is not scarcity but abundance, not fear but love, not fragmentation but unity. This is what the Egyptians meant when they said that breath carries the ka, the indwelling spark that makes you a living vessel of the divine. This is why the Greeks spoke of pneuma as the soul's atmosphere, an invisible presence that enfolds and animates all beings. This is why the yogis described prana as the river of consciousness flowing from the source to every heart. In reclaiming your breath, you reclaim your inheritance. And this inheritance is not merely personal, it is universal. As you learn to breathe consciously, you will find that your perspective shifts. You no longer see yourself as an isolated fragment, but as a wave in an ocean of being. You recognize that your joy is not separate from the joy of others, that your healing contributes to the healing of the collective. Imagine the power of this realization multiplying across millions of people, each awakening to the same truth, each breathing with the same reverence. What kind of world could emerge from such an awakening? It begins with you. In this moment, you have a choice. You can slip back into forgetfulness, allowing the ancient wisdom you have tasted to fade into a memory. Or you can commit to living as a conscious participant in the dance of existence, to becoming the living breath, here and now. You may think this is too simple, too obvious, but consider, what if the simplicity is the point? What if the reason you have struggled so long is because you were convinced the answer must be hidden behind complexity? What if the door was never locked? What if the only barrier was your belief that you were unworthy to enter? The truth is, you have always belonged. You have always been enough. And your breath, so humble, so ordinary, has always been the proof. As you finish reading these words, let your next inhale be an initiation. Let it be the moment you cross the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. Exhale softly, releasing every doubt and every story that told you were separate from the sacred. And feel, perhaps for the first time, the quiet joy of being exactly where you are, exactly as you are. This is your birthright. This is your remembrance. This is what it means to become the living breath. You have walked a path once tread by sages and seekers, a path that leads not outward, but inward. In remembering the ancient art of conscious breathing, you have reawakened to a truth too easily forgotten. You are not a separate fragment struggling against life, but a living expression of its deepest essence. Each breath you take is a return to that truth, a chance to embody the luminous presence that has always lived within you. As you move forward, let this remembrance guide your steps. Let it soften your heart, clarify your mind, and infuse your days with quiet wonder. Share this wisdom with those who are ready to hear it, for your awakening becomes the seed of countless others. If this journey has resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment, share your reflections, and subscribe. Together, we are weaving a community of remembering, a circle of souls daring to breathe with reverence and to live from the truth of our wholeness. Thank you for walking this path. May your every inhale be a homecoming, and every exhale an offering of peace to the world.